All right. So welcome to CS Office Hours. Today's topic is communicating change and getting buy-in. And I'm going to get you set up on the topic today. Communicating change is something where it's kind of the stepchild. Sometimes it ends up being sort of the afterthought. It's where you work on a whole big project and you put your whole heart and soul into it and you think about it, and then what happens? You feel like everyone should know about it. It's all you've been thinking about, dreaming about, sleeping about, eating about. But in fact, others may not actually know anything about it, right? So communication and getting that buy-in is really critical. And it's where so many projects can fall down. So we wanted to be sure that we covered that topic. Here we are. We've gone through 6 weeks of change management. We've talked about so many different types of angles on the topic, right? And going through and speaking about when it's organizational change, when CS or CSMs are change agents, either in the company or with the customers, how to convert challengers to champions, and then we started digging into how to apply it to building out a new program, like a customer advocacy program, right? And like I said, next week, we'll be talking about deploying a CS platform. But today, with communicating change and getting buy-in, this is something that really applies across the board. So another thing I was looking at, one of the quotes from one of my LinkedIn posts where we're talking about change management and also the book club that Cynthia and Marianne started. This really just struck me. I was listening to the Adam Grant podcast, and it struck me when he said the desire to belong overpowers the desire to improve. And, it just hit a chord with me. And I don't know if it hit you at all, if anybody wants to sort of add in the chat, but I wanted to just get you thinking about when can you think of examples, that illustrate this, right? Like, I'm thinking about like when groupthink happens. I grew up in a small town surrounded by farmland, right? Like that was some serious groupthink going on there. If you can imagine, I was the oddball. But when you think about when have you maybe been on either side, either the odd person out and you've had to be like, ooh, I'm standing alone over here, or when it's like, I know I could speak up, but it's kind of easier. Some of the things I was thinking about is like junior high, high school, definitely had a lot of that going on. I don't know if anybody else. Growing up in a small town, I was thinking too, like when you avoid allyship, when you think about being an ally, right? And then you see something that's like, ooh, that's not right. Do you speak up? Right? Do you kind of step outside the group and say, hey, folks, or do you kind of go along and you just think, well, maybe it wasn't such a big deal and stuff, like there's a lot of different kinds of examples where our desire to belong overpowers the desire to improve. And change management and the resistance to change management, I think, can also go along with that. That especially too, when you have those challengers, the people who are challenging change, sometimes they're leading the way and then you just sort of slip in and go with that person that's challenging the change. Instead of maybe going, I don't know, it seems like it might be an improvement, right? Yep, Ronald, exactly. Or Ron, actually. Sorry, you always have your full name there. But you can put a target on your back, right? Oh, and that reminds me, there was a is it Mel Robbins? What is her name? Somebody help me. Mel Robbins. There was a podcast. I'm going to add that into the Slack. I was listening it to this morning, and it made me think. There was a woman who was talking about like your 3 selves and like when do you adapt, when do you perform, and when are you sort of your more authentic self. So that's another thing I want to share. But but just thinking about some 2 more examples, and then I'll move on. But I just want to kind of take us down a little bit of memory lane as we're going through this, right? But if you're like first generation to go to college, that is big change. You're bucking, against everybody in the family for that. When you immigrate to a new country, right? You're leaving behind everything that's familiar, all of the people that are close to you, and you're going to a country and a culture and a food and people you don't know, right? So when you think about these types of things, and when you think about all of the people that are in the room, right? Think about all the different experiences they have, and how do you make them feel more comfortable in speaking up and voicing their concerns in a safe manner, or including them in the conversation so that they can all buy in, right? Because it is much easier to just, oh, I'm not going to speak up. No, it's all right. And then they don't end up adopting the change as well, because they didn't feel included in it in the first place, right? And I know for myself, when I've bucked change, it's been because I wasn't ever consulted. I wasn't ever involved in it. It's like, I don't know, that doesn't work for me. I'm not doing it, which, sorry to say, but even I've done that, right? We've all done that at some point, right? Okay. So I want to remind you, we've seen these shoes and hats before. What were the shoes for? Somebody want to come off mute, or do you want to write it in the chat? What are the shoes that we're thinking about? Anybody remember?
Putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
So when you're visualizing, we went through and did the visualization where you close your eyes, you think about taking your shoes off, putting your customer's shoes on, or maybe it's somebody internal in your company, putting their shoes on, right? And then literally stand up, look over at yourself wearing their shoes, looking at where they're standing. That is their perspective, right? What is that like? And then also the hats. Does anybody remember what the hats were for?
Everyone usually wears too many.
We're all wearing so many different hats.
Different hats, yeah.
And
Different roles, different responsibilities.
And so in a startup, you can be wearing 15 different hats, or like in the role that you have, and let's say you have a customer and they're going through onboarding, right? This onboarding may not be the only onboarding that they're doing. It may not be the only thing that they're doing. And then think about what else they have going on outside of work. When you're thinking about, when Trevor was talking about, they finally chose a new tool, right? So that's a big, change. What if they chose a new tool and it was the beginning of the pandemic when everybody all of a sudden had to, work from home? Would you introduce a new tool at that point, or might you say, a little bit too much going on, let's hold off on doing the new tool, even if it's the fantastic, great tool? Sometimes you can be overwhelmed with change, right? And then just going down memory lane a little bit more, remember, change is emotional. You're going through this roller coaster of change. And sometimes you get down to resignation and you're at the very bottom. And sometimes that's where change stops. Sometimes it doesn't go on beyond that. It isn't like, oh, you're definitely going to hit the whole roller coaster and make it all the way home, right? Sometimes it just stops. So I'm going to share also just a little bit of a course that I'm building to give you an idea kind of where I'm coming from with all of this, right? So I have DIMAP to the third power, and that's where you document and identify, you matrix and analyze, and then you've got people, purpose, and plan is P to the third, right? And so this is kind of like a change management process, right? But then you're not done, right? And so really you've got communicating C to the third, or you might think of it as C to the fourth, given that communicating starts with a C. But when you're communicating, you're thinking about the customer and you're thinking about the company, but you're also thinking about how you're communicating change, and you're also communicating the management of that change, right? So there's a lot of communication, a lot of elements, and you're thinking about how do you bring the stakeholders in, as well as how you're going to, what sort of cadence you're going to communicate, what level of change is going on. Well, I pretty much already walked through this, but part of the people is racy, where you have, what is racy? Somebody tell me racy. Responsible, right? Accountable, consulted,
and
informed. And then I've added in case for my project, training and customer, because when you think about it, when you're doing a whole new rollout of a product, you got to figure out, is there training, for whatever change management process you have, right? And then if you're doing something where it's CS focused, there might be things you're training internally, and there might be also a rollout and training that you might be doing with the customer as well, right? So that's some of these things that we've been talking about. Just another reminder slide here, guiding through the change. Remember, this was from when Kishla was with us, and talking about sort of when you're going from current state to the new normal, the various things that apply here. Disruption, acclimation, desire, choice. You have individual bandwidth and change fatigue that can also take place. Hey, Kathy, I see you've raised your hand. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Can you go back a slide for a second?
Yeah. Sure. This one?
In this one, yeah. Where does the buy-in happen?
Not yet.
not yet.
No, I'm going to talk about that when I get to the slide just after this one.
So sorry.
Right.
Okay.
No. But it's true, right? Like if you're thinking about this whole process, right, you do need to think about that buy-in needs to happen along the way, right? Like you can't just build the whole change management process and not think about then where am I going to insert this? It can be different for different types of change management processes, right? In terms of how early you want to get that buy-in, that communication. Sometimes you need to have something that's a little more baked before you can go to somebody so they have something to react to. Sometimes if you come to folks with something that's like looks like it's fully baked, then they're gonna be like, what? You don't want my input. You're already done. Right. So it's knowing something about the people and the personalities and a variety of things like that. But yes, so then just finishing up. So then we're talking about the different types of change and engagement in a customer journey, but you can think about it in any journey, right? And these are all the different types of emotions. And so then just going on to Kathy's question here. So when you're thinking about the customer, even on the customer side, when you're thinking about communication, you're thinking about there can be racy over there, right? There's the person who might be, the customer that you're working on point with, who's responsible. There's, people who are accountable within their organization. There are others that might be consulted in their organization or informed, what sort of training is involved, right? So when you're thinking about that whole process, now, if you have something that is simple, right? Like a quick little pebble on the trail, you're maybe not going to go through the whole racy format, right? But if you have something that's very involved, long and intense, even the quick hike up a steep hill or the long and steady trek, you'll think about on internally as well as with your customer, how does that racy play out, right? And how you're going to do it. But with all of this, then you want to think about cadence and frequency, and where do you need to involve them along the way to get that buy-in, right? And maybe there might be influencers that you need to think about, or maybe you need to think about what are all the objections, and maybe I need to gather all those objections early on and get some of those key challengers on board early on. It varies though, right? Sometimes you get a key challenger involved early on and they serve to kill it, kill it dead, right? And then sometimes you get them involved early on, and that's the way to make them your champion. So all of those kinds of things you want to consider. All right. So kind of moving along into here. So then thinking about too, planning and communicating for these change journeys, the type of cadence and how involved it is when it's a pebble on a trail. What might you do if it's a pebble on a trail versus if it's a long and steady trek? Want to hear from some folks. What do you think?
Okay, I'm gonna be dumb for a second and say,
Yep.
what do you mean by cadence in this context? Like,
Okay. Well, what would you say is cadence in this context? What would you, how, really like, how often might you, well, here, let's take it over to Trevor. Trevor, when you're working on this project to get a new tool in place, how often have you been meeting with folks, and who are the stakeholders in your project?
Well, for me, it's been my direct manager of IT, and then it's also been the
Oh, you're
owner.
very quiet. Is there a way for you to speak up?
Sorry about that. I'm joining from my phone. I'm getting ready to join a desktop. But
Oh, okay.
generally, it's my manager, so IT, so director, and then it's my owner and my owner's wife. So they run both the operations and purchasing. And then we've started to loop in, now that we've kind of narrowed it down, everyone else who's involved, from service, sales, delivery, install, so on and so forth. And we've been meeting every few weeks. We're probably going to meet more regularly now that we're getting ready to sign papers, and it's probably going to be something that's either like some sort of check-in weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, something like that.
Right. So when you think about that, then there can be different phases, right? There are going to be some times when you can do some things async and sort of check in. Then there's going to be other times when you need to meet more frequently. There's going to be times when there's going to be key people who are going to be very engaged, and others that are going to be informed, right? And so when you think about that, there might be different phases, different cadences at different times. And it could be, let's see, what are you saying there, Ron? Crawl, walk, run. Could be crawl, walk, run. It depends. Like with a pebble on a trail, something that's just a quick little thing to do, like that may not be, you may not even need to crawl or walk. You might just hop, skip right over it. What were you thinking about, Ron?
Yeah, I think with a lot of like change management, and 100%, it depends on the level of change and the amount of information that goes into it. But a lot of people there's only so much you can absorb at one time. So if I need to change my workflows, I need to change my kind of day-to-day. Like if you just throw the whole kitchen sink at me, it's not going to stick. So if you kind of iterate the different changes, hey, start here, change what you're doing in a small way, and then build upon that, oftentimes leads to better results than just like, here's all the information, here's everything you can do, this tool does everything, do everything. And it's like, whoa, 8.
Yeah.
And you have to
Right.
think multimodality too, right, Ron? Where it can't just be emails, it needs to be other types of communication so that you can kind of meet people where they are, given the structure that whatever it is you're trying to change.
Yeah, people learn different ways. I
Right.
prefer to read than watch a video, and some people hate reading and would much prefer a video. Some people want to be hands-on, so training sessions. Some people just want the webinar. Some people are like, just show me the finished product, tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it. I don't want to read, I don't want to watch, just put it in front of me and I'll figure it out. So different approaches for different people. You want to make sure you don't leave anybody behind.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that. Like some of the people who show up to these office hours, even I've been meeting with, and in my own process, they've given me great insight into some things to do, such as
have those different modes and methods of communicating, whether that's office hours, whether that's, working with customer success of a different team and helping with the onboarding, or, internal stuff with like an intranet or, an internal communication platform, just to give people as many opportunities as possible to be informed and be able to give substantive feedback.
Great. Yep. Chris, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's interesting when we look at these, when you're talking about planning in these different types of journeys, right? And communicating the change journeys that you're talking about. I think, honestly, in the space that we're in, the pebble on the trail is pretty much an hourly thing for us, right? There's so much change going so fast that when you said pebble on the trail, I was like, at first I was like, what is that? And I'm like, oh, that's called every hour or every 5 minutes. I mean, it's like every time you get an email, it's like, oh, I got to shift, I got to change, I got to, deal with that. So I think most of us, and at least for me, when I start thinking about change management, it's literally more, I kind of lean into the long and intense, because it feels like that's always the one where I really think about change management. Often I'm going to say, and not in a good way, but I often ignore change management or the process around it if it's a low and steady trek, or if it's a quick uphill steep. It's like, okay, yeah, maybe not as much on the quick uphill steep. I mean, if it's a big change and it's going to happen quick, yeah, you have to be really, really smart, and you have to kind of think about, unfortunately, you don't have the crawl, walk, run. In many cases, it's just a run, rest, so sometimes that happens. But I would say that often on some of the smaller things where we could probably leverage some good change management practices, and do a better job of communicating and working with cross-functional teams and things like that to help be aligned on some of the smaller things, whether it's like that low steady track or the pebble on the trail, which maybe it's not as big of an impact, but you can be a lot more direct in how you support and work with your teams, et cetera. So
Yeah. And when you think about it, like if you're downloading an app, then that could just be pebble on the trail, right? But still, how many people actually go and download the app? And so you might still be like, hey, did everybody download the app? Did everybody download the app? Did everybody download the app? Oh, it's still like, it's just a small little thing, but did they do it? But then adopting the product that's on the app on your phone, that might be a long and steady trek. That might be a quick hike up the steep hill, or that could be long and intense. You never know. But just some examples there of some, how you can even use some of these things as different phases, right? Steve, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things on that, and great to be with everybody today. And Jan, thanks for putting this together.
Yeah.
As you look at some of these pieces, is yes, we have, don't confuse installing with adopting, right? Because that's where you kind of get stuck, is that we think, oh, everybody installed it, but now we look at nobody's adopted it, right? They're not being used. We had that with a client of ours, and it was a huge epiphany for them, because they kept looking at going, oh, well, we deployed it, it's all done, everybody's got it. But then they come to find out nobody's using it. And for them, it was actually pretty significant, because it's an energy firm and they need to know where their people are located in case there's some type of problem. They need to know how many people to evacuate, right? So it's a big thing you need to adopt, right? The other thing is
so they need to understand that there's a pain or a consequence involved if they don't actually adopt it, to make them go through that effort, to have them think about then sort of the vision back here with the purpose, the why, the outcome, and the vision, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And having somebody assigned to that, because no one was assigned to adoption. Everyone had the project, and they said, okay, we're done.
Yeah.
But wait a minute, there's an ongoing care and feeding that has to be done. And it's a lot of organizations don't think about that, because it's not my job, and it just falls through the cracks. So that's where adoption starts to come and cause some challenges. Yeah. The other thing is, back to your grid of the 4 charts.
Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind as we plan and we build, as an organization thinks about change, and then we start to execute, we've already spent a week, a month, 3 months, 6 months to process that change, and we expect it to start to happen, but we don't allow the people that are receiving that change the same amount of time to accept it. And what
Yeah,
happens is we start to push back on, oh, they don't get it. They're not team players, but we never gave them the time to
to
process
adjust to it. Yep. Yeah, because I've been eating, sleeping, drinking this. Why don't you know this? And
Right.
that's where communication comes into play. So we do need to go to breakout rooms. We do have some questions for breakout rooms. Kathy and Trevor, is it critical that you add in before we go to breakout rooms, or?
Absolutely critical. My thing's brief.
Okay. then-
Mine is too.
All
But
right, real quick then.
I want to make a connection here between buy-in and adoption and acceptance.
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah.
were talking
Mhm.
about, because you
Thank you.
can't spend an hour on buy-in and say, okay, I did buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna really backfire, and you have to take it easy in some ways and plan
Well,
for that.
And buy-in might just be to the idea. That doesn't mean that they've adopted, right? And so,
Right.
yeah,
That
yeah.
too.
So definitions are important. Yeah,
Yes.
great. That's a great addition. Thanks, Kathy.
For me, my brief thing is like
Yep.
having to know when to let some information out versus people aren't ready, like we said, burnout, but also some people don't need to know everything about the change. They don't need to know all
Sure.
the whys. Some people just want to
Mhm.
know what's immediately going to affect them and then
Mhm.
move on with their lives. Some people need the whys. I'm one of those people. So my colleagues are like, I don't really care. Just tell me what I need to do.
Right. Absolutely. Hey, sure. Can you put the links out in the chat one more time? And
Sure.
and then as people are grabbing that, as we're going to the breakout, just to respond back to you, Trevor, sorry, I just want to be sure that was in motion. Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too, is allowing for different levels of communication. Sometimes it's based upon how they're participating in it, and sometimes it's just based upon personality and folks who just need more in order to get to that place. So not only having a cadence, but a way for people to dig in and understand more. But chances are everyone needs to know the why in order to actually go with you on this journey and adopt. Because if you don't have that why, that vision, that purpose, you don't go on the
Yeah.
journey.
You have to have it. You can't just not know what the why is. What I'm saying is some people, I mean,
They
a lot
don't
of
want
people
to
need
dig
it.
in.
Some people don't care. They don't need to know the why. They just want to know what they have to do.
Right. So you might give it its context, but they're not going to dig in there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. I am going to now stop sharing for a second. Wow, that's great. Everybody stayed in the breakout rooms. No one ended up coming back early. You were all in the conversation, it seemed. Yeah.
We never have enough time, Jan.
People have a lot of feelings about this topic.
Always caught mid-sentence. It's like, okay, you have 5 seconds left. Done.
Yeah, well, this is how, think of these as conversation starters, right? And then you have the community where you can continue it. You can do one-on-ones, you can do posts and debate it on LinkedIn. It's a conversation starter. 20 minutes is never enough time for these topics in a breakout room. Anyway. All right, cool. Well,
group 2 did have notes, but not written notes.
Yes. All right. So group 2, let's go first while it's still fresh in your mind.
Does anybody want to talk in my group?
Well, you can kick it off and then someone else can add. How about?
Okay. So we were basically talking about how it's almost like being a teacher and being told, implement this. It's like, but we don't know, there's no buy-in. Like, they don't really ask us. It's just like fluff asking. It's not really like, so do you guys think this is a good buy-in? Do you think this is a good product to use for students or for teachers? And they're just like, okay, guys, implement this. They're like, okay. There's no buy-in. So that somebody brought up.
I love that. But actually, it looks like you were in group 3, Shrug. I'm looking at the list here.
I might have had the wrong number. I put the notes in, but maybe I did it in the wrong spot.
Oh, really?
That might be me.
Oh,
I don't know if we
no
were 2 or
wonder.
3 now. I'm not sure.
No, I think you were, no, you did your notes in group 3. It's group 2 that's blank.
Oh, thank you,
So-
Timber. I was, okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, and that, but you bring up a good point, right? Because like, if you're just saying, what do you think? And then everybody's like, oh yeah, sure, fine. Is that real buy-in? And is that perhaps going to give you problems? Like sometimes there's someone there who might derail it or do like a major amendment or change, right? But you're better off hearing that and addressing that and even adjusting and making huge changes to your project if need be, right? Than not allowing for it and going through all that effort and having it fail, right? So yeah, what level of buy-in are you really getting? I love that thought. I see, Felicia, you're off mute. Does that mean you had something to add in?
Oh, I just wanted to be available in case you asked, but I
Good.
did take some notes though. This was a really great session. It really drove the point home. We came up with, there were a couple of things that were mentioned, being able to clearly communicate what's in it for the people that are going through the change, beginning with the end in mind so that they know what the end result is going to look like and they can keep their eyes on the prize. And then someone had mentioned making sure that they get some early quick wins, like something that's easy for them to do so that they're feeling, competent with with the change. And then something that we touched on at the very end was being able to assess the way your customer wants to experience change. And I think Nicole was just talking about that as we were leaving the room, but I thought that was really insightful, like having a way of understanding, kind of ahead of time how they want to experience it. Do they need lots of detail? Do they just want the down and dirty? It's a good conversation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
won't take credit because it was really because Ron listed all the different ways that you might present the information to someone. So no, it wasn't really me. I just liked that, what Ron said.
Nice. You're amplifying what Ron
Yes.
said. And Ron, was there something else we should hear about what you said, or was it captured? I don't
Yeah,
know
I
where
think
Ron
the other last one, which is underrated, and it sounds like silly, but I feel very strongly about this, is like whether it's internal change or external change, we're all adults. Like, talk to me like an adult. Don't treat me like a child. Don't treat, that you need to do it because I'm telling you so. Like, then I will turn into a child and be a rebellious youth. So communicate the value, talk to us like adults. Let's have a conversation, whether that's one-on-one trainings, whether that's one-on-one meetings, whether that's a group setting, tons of different avenues. But, if Felicia had mentioned like one case where she showed up to work one day and the tool was different, and we went from one tool to another tool, and it was just like, here it is. It's like you go home and your mom changed out the snacks and you're like, what the heck, Mom? Well, we got the great value cereal now. What's going on?
It's not what I signed up for. Cool. Great. What are some other highlights that people found what really resonated with you when you were in your group? Do you want me to call on a group, or is there something that somebody's like, oh no, we gotta
Jan,
be sure? Yeah.
Jan, I can share. I mean,
Yeah.
we had a great conversation, and one of the themes that I saw, because I was jotting down notes. I'm trying to be good about the notes, but really, there's like use all the mediums, right? Like obviously, talk to your colleagues and to your customers, but you can do webinars, office hours, on-demand content, focus groups. I love that. Who said that in our group? I love you for saying that because it was Angela. Thank you for that. Because that was like a new way. Find especially like deploying, and actually I think this applies to external users too, but like deploying a tool within your team. If you've got like really like a super user internally, bring them to a focus group to get more information from them. But I think that would count also for your external users. So use all the mediums because we know people learn differently and they engage differently. Go and offer different ways to communicate, and you're hopefully going to capture most of the people's attention that way.
Great. What are some other thoughts or things that really resonated?
In our group, we talked a lot about some of the same topics we talked sort of generally in the presentation. Like Mohammed had good points about small bits and pieces, not throwing the whole plan at everyone all at once. Garner was talking about some things where it's, how to communicate, allowing people to have time. They said they're having issues with that and trying to work with their customers due to like their company, which, side note, someone talk to them and help them on that. But I'll let them speak to their points. I don't want to speak for them, but I do think they were good.
Nice. And which group
It was
that?
group 4.
Group 4. Anything you want to add to that, folks that were in group 4? Mo, Garner, Lisa.
Yeah, I for my teams, they were really helpful in helping me address like maybe some different ways to approach it. But around my organization, which I think I talked about before, we recently got acquired and were originally more of an on-premise, heavily customized ERP system, and now are going to a SaaS approach and in the cloud, and trying to limit customizations, which is what a lot of customers didn't sign up for. So it's trying to communicate that value that we perceive is going to be great in the way of the future and what everyone's doing, to the competitive advantage that we used to give customers that they now feel like they're losing and don't fully understand or have that buy-in for the direction we're heading. And some customers are willing to go that journey and a lot are not, or they're pushing back a lot. And it's how we're positioning that value along with all these other challenges that we are trying to resolve internally, and the best way to resolve that without losing a lot of customers unnecessarily.
Yeah. Excellent. I just wanted to be sure that we caught, I don't know, is Sarah still here? Sarah Henschel? I don't know if she's still here. She had a couple. Oh, there you are. I noticed you had a few different things before we went to breakout rooms and also coming back in the chat. I didn't know if you wanted to share any of those.
Oh, sure. A little bit on the being called out here.
Oh, sorry. I'm calling you up, not calling you out, perhaps. I don't know. It just seemed like you had some good things to share.
Yeah, I just think when you make any change, you should definitely check in with the clients to see how the change is going, get their feedback, and also provide that feedback to the manager if it's, feedback that's strong and valid, and because that could also help improve the change process that is being implemented.
Yeah.
So change requires customer feedback also, as well as customers during the implementation.
Yep. Finding a way to get that feedback and making certain they feel comfortable sharing it. And yep, absolutely. All right.
It's important, Jen, about that one is the importance of understanding that we talked before about how the change can be negative, right? How people can think, right, that they complain about the change. And it's also important that when we're having those conversations that we're listening for that, and that they can feel like they can say those things without having to worry about it, right? Without having to feel like they're going to be labeled as a troublemaker because they're saying the bad thing, right?
Right. Making certain it's safe, finding a number of different ways to get that feedback. I know, and I'll just kind of close things up here because we went over today, and I appreciate your patience with me on all of that. But I loved how we were getting into the conversation before we even went to the breakout rooms. It was hard for me to stop that. But I was just going to say that oftentimes what I would do back when I was an individual contributor is I would try and reach out to various different customers ahead of time. And, key people who could provide insights, or key people that I thought might be challengers, and meet with them one-on-one to get their feedback and say, well, what would be really important to you? What would you see as some of the red flags? What would you want to see if it was really going to help you, and that sort of thing, and really make them feel like they were being heard, and then bring it back to them after we started to make those changes, like bringing it back to them and following up. And this is what we were able to incorporate. This is what we couldn't incorporate and why. and really kind of working with them so that they felt like they were included in it. And so sometimes you may think about that, whether it's an internal change or a change that's impacting your customers, ways to give them sort of a way to sort of dip the toe in and get used to the idea and feel like they've been included. So it's just something to think about as part of an informal process, as well as what your formal process might be. So that was the last bit that I had. Any other burning comments that we should share before we close up here?
For me, I just wanted to reiterate what Christine was talking about.
Yeah.
Like one of the best bits of advice I've gotten as I'm about to lead change is something like what she was saying, and giving like I think someone said office hours, like a forum, like something to allow people to come ask questions. They want to know the whys, you go into the whys. They want to complain, you go there, you allow them to complain, and you explain what you can about things to try to make them feel more comfortable. If they want to just ask like a very hyper specific question and leave, you let them do that. Just something to have on offer for people to have that open space.
Yep, absolutely. That's a great way to end it, is with office hours. Be sure to have some office hours for folks like we have here. All right, great. So continue the conversation over in Slack and LinkedIn. Come back next week. We're going to have Christy and Dish here leading Chris T and Chris D leading the next conversation. So really happy you're all here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of SuccessHour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.